Kia ora koutou, I am Ngapiu and this is Julia, and we are the Pou Kohikohinga Māori, Māori Collection Specialists here at Christchurch City Libraries. Today we have the privilege of sitting down with Māori poet, performer and artist, and the 2024 recipient of the Prime Minister's Literary Achievement Award for Poetry, Apirana Taylor.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora e tamatoa, no mai ki tūranga. We are delighted to have you here in our building to talk about your latest publication, In the Cracks of Light. What was the process of piecing this publication together like for you?
Well, just like all the others, I just, either in my writing room or wherever I happen to be, when I get a poem in my head, I've got a big whiteboard in my studio.
Yeah.
And for some reason, if I write them in black board marker, I've got them all there.
Yeah.
And I can just look at them, and any that need working on over time, just having them there, it comes to me. And poetry for me is it's like having blood. If I didn't have poetry, I wouldn't have blood pumping through my heart. So it's for me, and it might be the same for everybody else. I often get bad-tempered and deeply depressed, and I know that means there's a poem forming in here. And I'm not a woman, so I don't know what it's like to give birth, but in some ways it's similar. After I've written a poem, it's like I've given birth to my child. And I feel elated and exhausted.
Yeah.
But when I finish a poem and I've got it right, I still get the feeling of deep satisfaction of having created something that is as close to perfect as I can get it.
Yeah. And what's the process like? So is it easy for you to just settle on one version of it, or are you just constantly changing it, constantly?
No, I mean, I can get to where I want to get as far as writing a poem now a lot faster than when I was 20.
Yeah.
When I was 20, it's about this, it's about that. I'll put that in, take that out. I better put this back in. And it was a lot of shuffling around. Now, the experience has meant I go straight to it most of the time, which I find quite... I enjoy it. I really love it. It's about... I haven't got anything great to say, I don't think. It's just about the love of words.
Yeah.
For me, using words, mainly English, occasionally Māori, it's like using paint.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm doing a painting.
Yeah.
And I just love it. But, you know, what happened when there are a lot of artists on both sides of my family, on the Pākehā and the Māori side. But on the Pākehā side, they all had a wonderful way with words. And my father was a journalist, and he had a wonderful way with words, and I think I inherited it from him. And when I was very young, I was dyslexic, but I could put lines together in my head, and I was always doing that. And I think, that sounds good. And if I change that word and put that there, it's going to sound better, and people will remember it. So I was writing poetry in my head, and when I finally worked out how to write, I decided that I wanted to be a writer like Dad. Yeah. And I stuck with that dream, and then I forgot it and decided I wanted to be an All Black, and threw all my energy into that. But then one day in my first year at university, I saw Alistair Campbell reading his poetry on TV, and I just saw a brown person. And I thought, he's brown, I'm brown. If he can do that, I can do that. And I remembered my childhood dream. So I locked myself in my room at university and to write the great New Zealand poem. And it took me, I'd spend all day on one line. Alliteration is what they call it. Just moving the words around. And at the end of that day, I'd throw it out. So after about 2 or 3 weeks, my room, I was beginning to smell and all that. I was getting so stuck into this poem. It looked like it had been snowing. It was that thick with screwed up bits of paper. Yeah. And at the end of it, after about 2 weeks or something, maybe even longer, I had a poem that was 11 lines long. Yeah. It was supposed to be 500 lines. It was going to be the great New Zealand poem, and I was going to make a lot of money out of it. But by the time I got it down to these, I think it's about 11 lines, I put the pen down and just went, And I felt, that's it. That's me. And I walked out of university the next day with a pen and a little book in my hand to write poems. University is good for people who think, if I go to university, it's got what I want to get me to where I want to go, but it didn't have anything for me. I thought, why should I sit here listening to those lecturers telling me about what other poets think and from books? I'll go out and I'll read the book of life.
Yeah.
I'll look at the wind and I'll look at the sky and I'll look at the people and I'll read that book and write from that.
Yeah.
That was the path that I chose. I sometimes think if I just stayed at university and got my degree, I'd have a job and a list of degrees after my name, but I think I made the right decision.
Yeah, I would agree. I definitely agree,
Formal kinds of education have never worked for me. I love learning, but I'll go out and do it my way.
I find that that's a very Māori concept. We always learn from our environments and around us. And so just going out on a journey and writing poetry that way makes most sense. It's not just exclusive to Te Ao Māori or Indigenous cultures, but it's very fitting for who you are and the ahua that you bring to your poetry.
By doing. And especially because poetry is such like a personal expression of writing. It's really hard to just go and learn how to write a poem if you don't have anything to say, I think.
Yeah.
You said something before that actually links to one of the questions that I wanted to ask about how you feel like you're painting a picture when you're writing a poem, because I was thinking about how when I read some of your poems, particularly the location ones like Wānaka or the Governor's Bay one, that they feel like looking at a painting. So do you have in mind, do you take inspiration from visual art in terms of how you craft some of those poems? Or
Yes. I like the poem I wrote about Governor's Bay. I was out there walking around at Governor's Bay with my wife Prue and some of her friends, and the mist was low and the heron was there, and I think I've got an affinity with inlets and water and things. I feel creative there, and that poem came pretty quickly. I just wrote down the lines, shuffled them around, and there it was. And when I look at it, my 50 years of travelling through our country, I've written a lot of poems about the places that I've been to. And see, when I was a child and would be in primary school, Prima 1 or Prima 2, we called it in those days, the teacher would all be have our bits of paper with our crayons and our paint doing art, and every child loved doing art, including me. And then the teacher would say, right, put your art away and get out your books. We're going to write a story. And everybody would go, oh, but I'd go, yeah, because to me, just using the words was like paint. And I felt free. I felt free. In other lessons, you're boxed into the lesson, but when I could put a pen in my hand, I felt free. And there were teachers there that must have seen something, and they encouraged me. And if you encourage a little child, that's going to, they pick up on it.
Yeah.
Every time you encourage a child to do something good, you're doing something mighty yourself for the future.
Yeah, I agree. What do I want to say next? I love poetry. I love reading it. I find sometimes that there can be a little bit of a disconnect when you're just reading it off a piece of paper compared to when you hear an actual author speaking those words. Because I've listened to past interviews, and when you speak the words from some of your past poems, you can feel the mana and what you're trying to say, or the intent and what you're trying to convey. And sometimes it doesn't come across when you're reading it yourself, although I think that's just self-interpretation as well.
Yeah.
But have you ever considered doing a recording of your poems in terms of releasing it in that format? Not saying you have to.
I did some CDs, but nobody has CDs now, but I did CDs with my music and poetry, and I can't remember exactly where, but a lot of people have recorded me reading my poetry. And the written word, as we have it here on paper, is a good thing because it keeps the record there.
Yeah.
But I very seldom read from the book when I read my poetry. I recite it.
Yeah.
And that comes from about 40 years ago. up in front of a school reading my poetry like this. I looked over the top and nobody was taking any notice of it. Get rid of the book, that way I can keep an eye on the audience.
Yeah.
And I can work with the audience without the book. You know,
Yeah.
and I memorise all the poems. And I like to do it that way because I think that in all cultures, poetry was originally spoken.
Yeah.
You know, before we had the written word, and it was how we recorded our spirituality, our stories. It was spoken, and to hold the audience, whether you're on a marae with a lot of Māoris or in a Pākehā environment, you had to be able to hold them with the richness and strength of what you'd written down or what you had composed, and your delivery. And you know, in the Māori world, if your delivery isn't much good, people will let you know.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that it's kind of sad that the Western world, in so many ways, has sort of walked away from that, the importance of hearing the poetry, and depends so much more on this. This is my view, anyway. And I think that the Western world, in a lot of ways, needs to get back to reciting the stuff, as in the days of old, when you had bards and people keeping a mental record of the history of the people and things. I think to bring back, you got to be careful. Sometimes I would like to try for both things. It's got to work on the page, and it's got to work when I read it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I find that some people who just, I don't know whether they're modern poets, if you put what they've written down on the page, it doesn't really, I don't think it's that great. You know, but when they recite it,
Yeah.
that's when it works. So for me, it's got to have both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
On that note, in terms of like making it work on the page, I had wanted to ask about how you thought about what order the poems went into in the book, and like the ones that went next to each other, if there was a lot of intentional thought. Because some of them I thought, I don't remember which page they're on, like Crazy being next to Porangi, that felt, that makes sense. But then there was it this one? I felt a really intense juxtaposition between like Dawn and Why, because I was like, oh, this one's kind of like funky and silly, and then this one like punched me in the gut. And so I was like, wanted to know about how you thought about what you were going to do with it in the book.
I do think about it. Sometimes I just put them in the book in the order that they came to me, but sometimes I will arrange them so that there's other little messages, as you were saying, between the poems. And I've spent 50 years using my poetry often to go into bat for our Māori people. So I don't hate Pākehās. I'm half Pākehā myself, but I attack that system that has been a disaster for our people. So it's not aimed at individual Pākehās, it's aimed at what one people has done to another. And so I wish I'd done a better job of going on the attack, but I've done my best so far. But I know people, my poetry, when you get a book, it's a bit like shaking someone's hand with one hand and slapping them in the face with the other. So I will sort of intersperse them so that people just don't get worn down and they can go to another poem that it's easier for them or that they enjoy. And by that way, hope to get them to look at some of my other work. Yes, I think that's a good question. I will... I play around with them in the order. You can make little statements. As you said, you've got the one about the dawn and then the one about wives. We're opening up with a beautiful dawn. How's it going? The sun is a broken egg yolk on a grey dish amid streaks of bacon on a slick of red sauce. And the next poem goes, why? Why do we kill our children? Why do we make war? Why? So you go from a beautiful dawn to suddenly ask, why are we killing our children? There's a link.
It really made me pay it. I mean, like, I would have paid attention anyway, but it just really, like, the way it, like, switches so quickly, you're like, oh, okay, this is a strong message. And then you just sort of, like, you're focusing a bit more on it, which I quite liked.
One of my favourite pieces in this book specifically was Journey.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the one that represents leading on Wairua. And I've been up to the Cape many times, and I've seen that Pohutukawa tree branching off the side of the cliff. And you always feel that affinity. You feel that, I don't want to say longing, because it is our returning home, but I do. You see it. You feel that wairoa when you're in those spaces. And I felt a lot of heart when I read that poem.
Wow.
And I felt connected to it.
Thank you for mentioning that. It enables me to branch out into part of that thing is that, not in this book, but in one of my earlier books, I wrote a poem, I think it's called Tu Te Rerenga Wairua. And when I was sitting in university and I saw Alistair Campbell on TV reading his poem, and I realised that's my dream. I walked straight out of university practically the next day with a little notebook and a pen. And my aim was to walk, I was in Palmerston North at the time, was to go from Palmerston North, walk right up the island writing poems as I went. And when I got to the Cape, I was going to climb down the cliff, crawl out along that tree and sit on the edge of the tree and write poems. So I did. And I thought that's what poets did. And I suppose I was a bit of a romantic. I walked all the way up to the top of the North Island, sleeping in farmers' hay barns and getting chased out of them by farmers and thinking, you wait, I'm going to make you famous in my poem, mate. And I got to the Cape and I hadn't realised it, but that tree is about halfway down the cliff.
Yep.
And about another 200 or 300 feet below that, the sea was going. And I thought, no, I'm not going to crawl out on that tree and sit there and write poems. And I had, when I was about 20 then, in about another 30 or 40 years' time, when I'm dead, I'll come there and I'll sit there and write poems. I'm getting older. It's gone up to about another 60 or 70 years time. And then I'll sit there and write poems. And you know, I got there, I looked around, I could not write one single word because this busload of American tourists had showed up. And I was trying to get spiritual, and all I had was this, you gotta get us some of that dirt, Sam. You know, I got really angry with them, and I couldn't write a thing. And it wasn't until I had my first residency at Christchurch University about 30 or 40 years later, the poem came to me. You know, and so people sometimes ask me, how long does it take you to write a poem? And I say it takes me anything from 3 seconds to 30 years. But,
So do you have like ideal conditions for writing? Like, do you prefer silence or music or inside or outside, or is it just
Doesn't
kind of
really
wherever it's
matter.
happening?
yeah, I mean, I wrote a long short story which was really well received, but I was a student at university at the time, and I just left university and I was staying out in a hippie flat where we had rock concerts every day and every night and everything else that went with it. So I'd go into my room, there would be people sprawled all over the floor doing all sorts of things. The air was thick with smoke and beer bottles all over the place. My table was stacked up with beer and drinks, and people all around me. I just ignored them, got on with it. I can block out, you know.
That's good.
Yeah. And other times, yeah, very quiet. I've got a beautiful writing room, studio. So. Or I'll just sit in a little corner quietly and while everybody else is doing something else, write it down.
Yeah.
If it's there, it's there.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to stop me.
Do you have a favourite poem that you've written?
It's well, there's one called Sad Joke on a Marae, which has been studied for years and years all over the show. Yeah, it will always stand there, but it's changed. Yeah, I mean, the lines in that poem, Sad Joke on a Marae, go, Tihei Māori ora I cried, kupe paike te koti rewi and te rauparaha, I saw them, grim death and wooden ghosts carved on the meeting house wall. And the only Māori I knew I called Tihei Māori ora. Above me the teko teko raged, he ripped his tongue from his mouth and threw it at my feet. Then I spoke. My name is Tu, the freezing worker. Ngāti Db is my tribe, the pub is my marae, my fist is my taiaha, jail is my home. Tihei Māori ora I cried. They understood the teko teko and the ghost, so I said nothing but Tihei Māori ora, for that's all I knew. So those lines, Ngāti Db is my tribe, the pub is my marae, my fist is my taiaha, jail is my home, have been quoted all over the place for years. But you see, the world's changed. I need to change those lines to Ngāti Red Bull is my tribe. You know, things like that have changed, but people still get it. because if you underlook those words, the story is the same. So that poem's been around and it's changed people's lives. I've read that poem in Arohata, and the inmates come up to me and say, we read that poem and it made us decide to change our life. One woman was in Arohata, heard the poem, they brought her up out of the digger to come and listen. And she heard that poem and she decided to change her life, and she got a degree in prison. And she was, several years, 10 years ago, so the head of English at one of these posh Christchurch schools.
Oh, really?
Wow.
So, and there's been, on that poem, I've got so many similar stories. I'm glad that I wrote it. So that one stands out. But you see, when I wrote my first poem back in university, it was only 11 lines long. I thought, I'll get on to the next one. But I didn't. But the next year, I just kept writing that poem out over and over again. And I said to the older writer to me, I can't get off this poem. I just sit down and write a new poem, and I just write the same one over again because I was enjoying it so much. And he said, well, what you've got to do is once you've finished it, put it out of your mind so you can get on to the next one. So generally, the poem I like the most is the one that I've just written.
Oh, yeah. What about in here? Is there a particular one in the new book that you
I like
like
them
the
all.
most? Well, I mean, they're all your children, of course.
Yeah, but no, I can't say there's anyone in particular. I like to read this poem that I've written called Lines, which was inspired by the painting of Tome Iti, because people can relate to it, and it takes us through the pain of what we as Māori people suffered having our language crushed, and it goes on to. It starts off in English saying we must not speak Māori, and ends up in Māori saying we must speak Māori. So it goes through the pain that our people have been through, and it comes out the other side with the healing. So I quite like that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
One thing that I really like in some of your past publications that I read, there's always a poem dedicated to Pou.
Yes.
I love reading those ones.
I loved this one. I loved the one in here. Where's the for Pou one?
It's wonderful seeing the love you have for your wife. And this one was great. I love this one.
I've written, some people criticise me. I've written poems about other women. I mean, I'm not a womaniser. I love my wife, But, of course, I've written poems about other women, and I got criticised, why don't you ever write about your wife, Pou? And what they didn't know is I've written thousands of poems for my wife, and I give, for Pou, she doesn't like being called my wife, for Pou, my wife, and I give them to her, and I went to read them out one day, and she took them off me, and she said, no, you're not reading those. They're not for the world, they're for me. And,
that's fair enough.
And she's very, very self-effacing. She's a person whose natural, beautiful nature is to serve, but she's not servile. And so she loves doing this, but she is really put out and angry whenever I try to thank her. And whenever I publish a poem that she's in it, I'm really taking my life in my hands. Honestly, she really has a go at me.
Oh, really?
So
you just sneak one in.
I just keep going, and I get a bit of a whack around the lug holes mentally and told, don't you ever do that again. But, I mean, she's done so much for me. It's my way of thanking her. And I want people to know how lucky I am.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And you can see that in the words that you've written.
Yeah, I love that. I thought it was very romantic. What else we got? Do you read many other poets and like particularly contemporary sort of new up and comers much? Are there any you're keeping an eye on?
Sporadically. I'm too busy thinking out my own poems to have much time for everybody else's.
Fair enough.
But there are some younger Māori poets, and I would dare say there's Pāka ones coming along too, who are writing in English. There's Taia Tibble, Ruby Solly, Nicola Hawkins, James Brown, There's another one who's more of a rap poet who I like. We've got some good ones coming up. So I do read their work. When I went to university, we were given all the English poets, and I still like them. I love reading their poetry. I often think to myself, if the Pākehās had just come to New Zealand, taught us to read and write, dropped off their poetry and left, it would have been all right. But yeah, I enjoy those. I like Keats, because I find Keats is a lot different from the way I write. Keats uses a lot of rich, sensuous imagery, and I just love Keats's poetry.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on it. Who else? The poets in New Zealand. Alistair Campbell, I always liked his poetry. He's one that inspired me to get going. Dennis Glover, very, very bright man when it comes to words. And my mentor is a Māori poet called Rolly Hubbard. He was writing and publishing before Hone Tūwhare was, and at his best, he's as good as Hone Tūwhare easily. He took me on, I knocked on his door one day with a fistful of poems, and he thought I was a member of the Mongol mob because I was living on the streets at those days, and he wasn't going to let me in, and I practically pushed his door, and I had my hand behind my back, and he was having a feud with Dun Mihaka at the time, so Rolly Hubbard had a slasher and an axe by his door, and he had a slasher thinking that I'd come to get him, and I whipped my hand out, and he goes, and it was a handful of poems. I said, I hear you're a poet, and could you look at my poems? And he looked after me, and I'm kind of mixed in with, as far as the time, I just caught on to the coattails of Patricia Grace and Witi Ihumaida and Hone Tūwhare and Kerry Hume and Rolly Hubbard, and those writers at that time, they were about 20, 30 years older than me and were pretty established. I was just starting out, and I kind of hooked onto their coattails and spent a lot of time with them. And I must say, I was a real arrogant pain in the ass. I thought I knew everything, and that, look out, I'm going to knock you all over with my poetry. And their response was to just uffy me and nurture me and look after me. And I never forget them for that.
That being said, has anyone ever done that to you? Just knocked on your door and been like, I've got poems, can I read them to you?
It happens quite a lot. I'm not a very giving person in that way. I have to remind myself, remember what it was like for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I be as encouraging as I can.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Have people knocked down your door about it, or have they come to you like in public?
Bit of both.
Yeah.
So, I'm not, I have to, we're all given our different ways, and I have to sort of remind myself to give back that way. I'm not a people-orientated person.
I think you do give back though. So, as we talked about earlier, which the camera won't know about, we talked about how when I was younger, you did a poetry reading at my school. Well, actually, it was at our school camp at Blue Skies, I remember. No, it wasn't poetry reading, it was storytelling.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the proper details, but I remember it was the mountain and, was it the wind?
The ant in the mountain.
The ant in the mountain. And I remember you telling the story. No paper, just being very animated, and they had a massive impact on me because I remember watching this live storytelling and just loving every second of it because you did engage us, because you didn't have that book and that piece of paper. And also when we were talking about how we were interviewing you with other co-workers, it was like, oh yeah, he came to my school one time, he just happened to be in town. And so from my point of view, you do give back because you wander around our country and people grab you when they can.
I suppose we're all different and we give, and we all have our different ways of giving. And it's funny you should bring that story up about the ant in the mountain. It gets brought up by other people to me, and they saw me doing that story when they were about 5, and they're now 50, and that's still in their minds.
Yeah.
I find that a great compliment. And I haven't done that. It was part of my storytelling routine, and I officially retired as a storyteller about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
to stand up in front of 500 5-year-olds with just a guitar and your stories in here and hold them for an hour takes a lot of energy. You know, I'm starting to get tired, but sometimes I wish I could go back and do it.
Yeah.
That story, The Ant in the Mountain, I wrote it I only ever went to one writing workshop, and it was run by Patricia Grace, and she got us to make up a word and write a story about it. So the word I made up was cha-cha-cha. That's why it's in that story.
Funny, that was one of my questions, is have you ever made up a word?
Cha-cha-cha-cha. And that story about the ant, it's about big, small taking on big. And eventually, not this generation, but the next generations continue to fight and shift the mountain.
Yeah.
And it can apply to many things. It's very applicable to our Māori world. If we want our language to survive, we've advanced it this far, but the next generation has to pick up the ball and carry it. If it doesn't, if they don't, it dies. So the next generation has to pick up the ball and carry it. So it applies to everybody in every culture who is small and trying to take on something big. And I think that's why every culture and every race can relate to it.
Yeah.
You've almost made me think about taking up storytelling. I'd like to get back into it, but it's exhausting.
It's very hard to hold children's attention for a long period of time, much less hundreds of them.
Yeah.
It's the most gratifying thing, and I deliberately wanted to do it because young people, and it's been going on for generations, continually pounded with cheap garbage, you know, little things that go pop in your face every minute. So there's no story, it's all gimmick.
Yeah.
And I think it's bad for their brains. It doesn't give their brains a chance to develop to the extent that they can. Where you can just tell them a good story, just get them to listen. You're doing the world a favour, I think.
Yeah.
You're helping to develop their minds. I mean, it's been proven that always looking on your laptops or what, I don't even know, it is damaging, you know.
Yeah.
So the live storytelling and doing it live and holding them and keeping it simple. When I did storytelling, I had a few musical instruments, my guitar and my voice. If you've got good stories, that's the secret.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you learn to read the audience. You can see, I think I better tell them a funny story now. That story I told them was just so sad, I need to pick them up. And I love being in front of an audience. That's where I feel at home there.
Yeah.
If you put it round the other way and I'm sitting in the crowd, I feel lost. I think I've got the dry horrors and I can't make sense. You know, I feel in a terrible way, but as soon as I get out in front of the audience, and I think we all have our gifts, and it's something that I love to do.
Yeah.
You see, you know when you're hitting it because you look at the audience and their faces are shining light, and it's coming out of their eyes, and you know you've got them, and you can go, those sort of things. It's dependent on me, the storyteller, and it's dependent on the audience, and you're both working together. It's very, very gratifying, and it's powerful.
The only other question we have is about the cover.
Yeah. I had my own design for the cover. and I looked at what I'd designed and what I was going to paint for the cover was a load of garbage. And Pou suggested she got a pen, just sort of drew a shape like that and said, "Why don't you do that?" I said, "Thank you, darling." I went and just drew it and painted it.
Yeah.
It's worked well. I love it.
Yeah.
And what about the title?
In the Cracks of Light. Well, I just wrote a poem. A poem was born in the cracks of light in the dark wall, and that says it all for me.
Yeah.
A poem comes out of the cracks of light in all the darkness that we're surrounded by. So,
thank you so much for coming to chat with us. This has been really cool.
E pai e hini mā, ka nui te pai ki te kōrero ki au koutou, me o kōrua pātai. He pai ki au kia kōrero a haumo e tahi o aku o ngā mea pāna ki taku mahi. Kia ora rā, o tēnei kōrero.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. It's been a real joy. Would love to see you again.
Ai a popo.
Hey,